I'm just happy to know that Jeremy is also somebody who likes to be in people's breeches. And apparently he's a professional, so he's got it over me.
he's director of breeches.
I get paid for it.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax, HIPAA help is on the way.
Welcome to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast. My name is David Sims from HIPAA for MSPs, and joining me today, as always, is Donna Grindle from Card and Compliance. How's it going today, Donna?
Just chipper today. I'm getting over a cold, so I apologize in advance.
A cold, yeah.
It's not the flu. I got my shot.
Okay. Well, that's better than the other things that could be ailing you.
Yeah, really. As you point out often, I'm getting old.
Yeah, well, sometimes the truth hurts.
Yeah, you just wait.
So today we have a guest, and I'm pretty excited about what we're going to be talking about because I love talking about breeches. So we're going to really look at what happens when a practice or a business associate has a breach, and what should that response look like. And I think we have a lot of questions about that. Typically those questions don't get asked until it's too late. Like, hey, I think I had a breach. What am I supposed to do? And it's certainly best to have a breach response plan in place well before you get to that point. And Jeremy Henley, who's joining us today, is the Director of Breach Services for ID Experts, which is one of the most well-known companies about and around breach response and ID theft response and those things. So welcome, Jeremy, to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking with you guys today.
Awesome. So Donna, what is it that you want to drag him into first?
Well, first I thought we could just let Jeremy tell us a little about him and ID Experts and the company itself as a beginner overview.
Absolutely. So I've been with the company since 2009, and we actually got our start in 2003. So we've been at this for a little over a dozen years at this point. We actually started out handling identity theft for individuals, and it was packaged more like an employee benefit back then, where some of our clients would bring us in and they would offer either a company paid or sometimes an employee paid benefit to have identity theft protection. So if they ever experienced an issue, we would just handle it for them, sort of on their behalf, using a limited power of attorney and so on, and just work until that identity theft was corrected. And so the first couple years of our existence was providing that as a benefit and growing that business. We had a lot of success in the financial industry of offering that program. And so as that business grew, also in 2003 was the first breach notification law was passed in California, which was followed by several other states shortly after, where it made it mandatory that you had to send folks a letter and basically tell them if you lost their information. And one of our clients, actually back then, who was a bank, they had us providing the service for their customers, or rather for their employees, at a breach of their customers, and they called us one day and said, "Hey, we've had an incident down here. The news is coming to do a report on it here in about 4 or 5 hours. Can you guys be down here in about an hour to help us figure this thing out? Because that thing you do for the employees, I think we need to do it for our customers now. And we also have to send a letter and set up, a way to handle all the calls we're going to get for this. So can you guys do that?" And so we said, "Sure, we can figure that out." So we went down there and met with them and walked out of there with an agreement to set up a call center, send out the mail. And when people called and asked questions, we'd have the answers ready to talk with them about what happened, but also their questions about identity theft and what could happen, and then protect them. And so we got them enrolled in some protection, and if any of those folks had issues, we fixed it for them. And that was really the beginning of our breach response business in about late 2004, and then it just took off in 2005, and we've been doing that for the last 10 years now.
Wow. It's just like any other small business. You're working along and then somebody says, "Hey, can you do this?" And you're like, "Yeah, sure. I'm going to expand my business right now." That's what happened to David. He just called me up and said,
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's happened to me several times. Somebody will ask me about doing something, and then I'll say sure, and then I go back to my office going, "Oh gosh, what did I just agree to do?"
And then
But
suddenly you're an expert.
Yeah, it can take you down some pretty good roads. So I'm assuming, Jeremy, that business has probably seen some exponential growth here in the last few years.
Yeah, it's been incredible. Actually, we have, probably grown 15 times since the revenue we were at when I started with the company back even in just 2009. So it's been a pretty interesting ride, and moving locations and expanding off the space and bringing in all kinds of new systems and new technologies and tons of new people, and we actually have very low turnover too. So it's been a lot of fun because most of the same people that were here that built the company and have been with the company since I started too are mostly still around. So it's just a really fun place to work.
Well, that's always a good sign. If you have low turnover, it's always a good sign. If you have low turnover while you're growing, it's an even better sign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun.
Well, and you guys have had to, because you had the contract to do the big UCLA breach and the OPM breach response and those kind of things, right?
We do, yeah. So that's been more incredible growth this year with public information, but Office Personnel Management, OPM, that's a $300 million deal for the company. So it's a big one.
Wow. And I'm sure you get some gratification, if not a lot of gratification, out of just helping these businesses maneuver something that could be very, very bad for them if not handled properly.
Yeah, I'll always tell people that the most interesting part of my job is every time the phone rings and someone has this issue that's been dealt at their company, because even if it is a hack or it is a rogue employee or whatever it may be, it happens to everybody and you're not expecting it. And the way it happens is almost always unique. There's, some consistencies for sure, but each story is unique. And so just understanding and talking with the clients about what happened and how it happened and how they discovered it, it's such an interesting story every single time that you just you appreciate how big of an issue it really is. And you kind of, in a weird way, you respect the criminals that are out there doing this because they're so creative and always a couple steps ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, as soon as you get something that stops them, they find another way.
Absolutely.
So it's something that we're well aware of, since that's our job, is to be on the side of, can we stop them? And we tell most people it's not a matter of if there's a breach of information, it's when, and how much can you, A, mitigate what they can do, and B, be prepared to address it when it happens, which is where you guys come in. And we've actually started having our clients, a lot of times we get to talking about price at the end and those kind of things. But one of the nice things about working with you guys is you have bundled products and those kind of things, but we just have people set everything up with you and they know that you know who they are. It's not like, okay, who are we going to call? They know who to call and they know what you offer and all of those things. In the event that they need you, everything's ready. It's kind of like insurance, but at the same time, there's not like some big payment where they have to open up a big account with you. And that makes it very appealing to small businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. We have always had a program where you can retain us, but it's a no cost retainer. So we're get the legal stuff out of the way, so we're not having to deal with that when your house is on fire. We can jump right into the nuts and bolts of sorting out what exactly needs to be done and just get right to work on it.
Yeah, it's definitely something we found interesting. And right away, we're like, okay, all you people we're working on breach response plans, here's who you're going to talk to. So,
yeah. Before we go into some of the products that ID Experts offers, what would you say is your ideal client? I mean, I know it's important to me, even though I'm an IT provider, it's important to me when I'm reaching out on behalf of my clients, my medical, dental clients and all that, to make sure that I'm bringing somebody in that's not going to cost them a fortune and charge them, what a hospital would be expected to pay. So I have to make sure those costs are in line with my ideal client, which is usually an independent small practice?
Well, our ideal client is one that just had a breach, so that's
It's pretty easy.
Yeah, the bad guys, I'll call them. They're they don't discriminate. They'll breach anybody. So, we see businesses in all shapes and sizes for sure, all industries. And we see large breaches at small companies and small breaches at big companies and vice versa. And so, it really doesn't. There isn't really like a exact client. I can tell you we see a lot of what we call the mid-market segment or SME or, the medium-sized company, and the smaller companies make up a lot of our client base. And, most of them are companies a lot of you wouldn't have heard of unless you're in their region or in their town even. We have all kinds of healthcare clients is a big section for us. Probably about 40% of our breaches come in some sort of a healthcare flavor. We have, a lot of retail and online retail. We do a lot in the university or higher education, and then certainly the government, both the federal and state governments are a big part of our revenue as well.
Okay.
And you're priced accordingly.
Yeah, you definitely can handle the smaller practices then.
Yeah, one of the things that, is kind of the secret sauce, if you will, of what we do is it's being able to scale up and scale down the services that are necessary for a particular breach. And, I think we'll, probably talk about it here at some point, but there's a lot of different things we do. We don't have to do all of them by any means, though. It's sort of an a la carte program that we patch together what our client needs. And, that can be based on the incident, and that can be based on, what they can afford, a number of things. So that ability to scale up and down, though, keeps our costs down so that we can also keep the costs down for the client, because, just like the clients we serve don't know when the breach is going to hit, neither do we. And so we can't have all these people sitting there just waiting around for the phone to ring, expecting a large breach to come in or a certain size of breach to come in. It'd be really difficult, to kind of translate it. It'd be really difficult to have a for-profit fire department, because you just don't know when you're going to need them.
Right.
You need them right now when you do, and you need as much as they can. So, that's why you don't see that out there.
Well, that sounds like a perfect segue to talk about the fire.
Mm-hmm.
So when these breaches occur, and we've got a list of the different products that you have, and I thought we could kind of talk about the product and then what kinds of scenarios you would use them in. If that makes sense. So, or you can just lead us through it if you've got a normal way you go through it that makes better sense, because we know that we don't often follow any kind of order or pattern.
Well, so we have sort of a, just stop me as a question comes up, but we have a patented process that we call your response. And, we came up with that because we recognized years ago that one of the things that was different about our services versus some other companies is that our clients very, very rarely lost business and almost never got sued. I think we've only had a couple clients actually be dealt a lawsuit, and, they probably deserved it, to be honest. They were pretty out of line with what they were doing in their practice. And so, it wasn't related to the work we did at all, but just the class actions you sometimes read about in the press with some of the larger companies and larger breaches that occur. Only 2 times has that happened to any of our clients. And so we look back at, well, how are we getting this great result? And we patent it. We call it your response. And it's sort of a process that we take a client through when they have an incident, regardless of who they are, what size they are, even what size of breach it is, really. And so the discovery of the incident is always the first step. Someone recognizes there's an issue, whether that is, you come in and the window's broken and all the computers are gone, or you come in and the voicemail's blinking and it says on the other end that, you got a report that someone saw somebody stealing stuff that they shouldn't be, or viewing stuff, or it's maybe your technology is telling you that there's information leaving your system, and, you've got alerts when you come in that a certain amount of data is going out your door, basically. And so then that discovery process is really, let's figure out, what do we know about what's happened so far, and what do we not know and need to figure out, and how do we do that? And so sometimes it's as simple as, I lost my computer. Unfortunately, it wasn't encrypted, but fortunately, I did back it up recently, so all my data on there is backed up in this other place. We can look at it. We can see what someone might have access to, and we can start going to the next step with that. Other times it's not as clear, and we need to bring in our forensic experts and really start to analyze the facts. And so we'll do a lot of research on systems and pulling logs down and understanding what data is available to look at and review, and just start to pull together all the evidence from a case so we can start to make some determinations as to how a hacker got into your system, where they went in your system, what they looked at, and did they actually, send any data, or did they do any exfiltration out of your system with sensitive data? And if so, what type of sensitive data was that?
So you're looking into you're in the servers and the machines and the network devices and everything at this point. You're bringing in the big guns that are the uber nerds that can find the traces of what's happened inside the electronic systems, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. But, sometimes it goes even farther than that. We're looking at, depending on what happened again, we're looking at key card access to the door and see who was in and out of the building. Does that match? We're looking at videos if you've got a surveillance system. We're talking security guards if you're that kind of a facility. And, wherever that evidence might be, we're trying to collect it, image it, or, some other way, hold on to it so that we don't compromise that evidence, and then begin to create a chain of custody so that we have evidence logged in a way that will stand up in court, because hopefully what's going to happen next is we're going to show and prove that you didn't have a data breach, and we're going to have a lot of evidence that points to all the facts that it wasn't a data breach, even though the initial facts were there's an IP address bouncing around in your system that looks like it's located in China, and they're encrypting massive amounts of data and sending it off to some other place. You get that phone call and those are the facts. It doesn't sound very good. But,
Never.
But we've had that and proved that, that is exactly what's happening. But the data that was going out was like order information for like a fast food delivery company. So, it was napkins and cups and straws, and where they were supposed to be going was what was being stolen. So not a big deal in the data breach scheme of things.
Right, in the data breach scheme of things. Now, one of the things you hit on when you were discussing that is how important it is to not panic and start fixing and deleting things.
Yeah, that's one of the bigger challenges we run into, especially with that medium and smaller company, is either A, they don't have their technology configured in a way that it's recording long enough all of the data that it could be. And so what that leaves you with is, not enough evidence to prove anything other than that something bad happened. And, then you kind of get walked down the path of, well, we know we were breached or we had a security incident. We can't prove that they didn't take any data. So now what do we do? And, we run into those situations a fair amount of times because either, like you said, they wiped the device as soon as they knew it was infected and they destroyed all the evidence. And there isn't enough other places sometimes to go and collect evidence to prove that, they were infected, they had a security event, but nothing really happened. And so you run into situations there where you might need to notify, potentially, the whole portfolio of customers or clients that they may have. You also run into situations where the data overwrites itself. So maybe it is configured to be creating logs, but they're being overwritten every 2 weeks or every 30 days. And so we're in the situations where we can tell when an event stopped, but we look back through the logs and we can't tell when it started because they don't go back far enough. So then again, you run into a situation where maybe you've got 10,000 customers, let's say, and we can see that they've definitely accessed 400 or 500 of them over, a period of time, but maybe that's it. Maybe it started right before you started erasing data, and it only is 500 or 600 clients that were breached, but you don't know. So you almost have to notify all 10,000 in that particular kind of a case.
So that's where you need to know that your IT company, whether it's your IT department or your IT company, it's one of the things that we say is know how much information you're retaining. And that's a big reason why is that difference between 500 or 600 and 10,000, right?
That's right. Yep. And so it's important. There's a lot of clients who will, you kind of put yourself in the business owner's shoes, and it's get me up, get me running so I can go make money and run my company. I'm not worried about how I'm going to sort out when a breach happens. Isn't high on their list at that point, typically, if ever. I'm more worried about day to day and just, operating the company. And so, even if you get your IT shop set up and set up running well, it's pretty far down that list of things that you're looking at as to how long are we keeping the logs from the traffic coming in and out of the company.
Well, it's definitely at that point where you say, okay, what we know is that you've got, let's say we know that there's 600 is very different than if there's 10,000. But in most small businesses, notifying 600 or notifying 10,000, it's a crisis to them, particularly in, a smaller town, or, your reputation can be affected, those kind of things. Sometimes people don't care. Sometimes others, they do. And that notification and crisis communications feature of your response package, what kinds of things? I mean, we know about, okay, well, the letters have to go out and the press has to be notified, but do you notify OCR on their behalf, or is that something they have to do? And what kind of crisis communications are you actually doing in there?
Yeah, so what we'll look at when we're working with somebody is the whole picture. So, you mentioned a lot of them, but part of the analysis phase, which is part of our kind of the second phase after we figured out what happened and what data was compromised, and let's say you are going to end up with having to tell somebody some bad news. Part of that analysis is who do we need to tell? And so that's going to be most obviously the individuals whose data is impacted. But then you have other folks to consider. Maybe you have to do a press release because it's required, or maybe it just makes good sense. But sometimes it's required. In other cases, you'll potentially need to notify the Office of Civil Rights, potentially the Attorney General's office in your state, potentially other states, right? So the laws protect the individuals, not apply to the company. So it's wherever those individuals reside that you have to look at the laws, that cover them. So if you're, a company that has clients coming in from all over the country, or maybe you're on a state border or near one, you probably have a multi-state response almost always because people will move out of state and so on. And so you have to look at a lot of different angles and figure out who all needs to be notified, because it's never just the people who are impacted. So we're looking at that. We're thinking about the press release. We're thinking about how we're going to answer the phone, and what that messaging is going to look like on the phone, what the messaging is going to look like in the letter. We're going to make it match as closely as possible in all of the different areas. Depending on how big of an event it is, and that's not necessarily size-wise. It can be a number of things that make it a critical event for a company. We can even coach executives on how to be prepared to answer questions with the press, get them prepared to answer questions with some of their top clients, whatever they need, all the way down to someone just calls the main line and gets the reception. What are they going to say if they start getting asked questions? We're preparing those folks with just a short script of here's what you say, here's what you definitely don't say, and here's where to send them to.
Yeah, it's always the thing that we tell them, when we're doing the breach response plan, and we say, what do you want employees to say? And everybody's, no comment. That's all you want them to say. And I was like, you need to realize your employees could be walking out the front door of the office as the news truck pulls up, and boom, right there they are. And no comment is one thing, but staring blankly like a deer in the headlights at a TV camera is a whole different ballgame of knowing what to say. So being able to prepare your staff is really important, because you never know what's going to happen. You may not even be aware. The press may be aware before you are, referencing some of these cases where reporters have found things in the dumpster, and then they start reporting on it, and that's how you learn about it.
Yep. And that's a good reason to have the plan ahead of time and have as much of this worked out as you possibly can. And I'll usually somewhere when I'm speaking about these things, I'll kind of compare it to a pilot and flying an airplane and having their checklist, and all the training you do to fly a plane is they spend a ton of time practicing emergencies and crash landings, hoping that it never happens. But it gives you the best shot of surviving if you practice landing your plane while it's on fire a few times in a simulator, or simulate that kind of an event, because when it actually happens, it's going to be a lot more stressful when it's real. And if you've never done it before, that's not the time to start learning.
I had a pilot friend of mine that when I fly with him, and he got my attention when he said, you need to remember, I do all these checklists and things because a landing is nothing more than a controlled crash.
Yep.
And that, he said, when we're in the air, it's too late now. But it's the same concept. It's a breach can be controlled or not. And having these breach response plans that we really try to get them to do is very important to that. And so if we do the notifications and we have the crisis communications and we get all those things in place, and then you have these different monitoring tools that they can offer to the patients who have been involved in a breach. And you offer, we know about credit monitoring and identity theft. Clearly, if that's where you got your start, you've really got that part nailed down. But then you guys offer a health monitoring kind of thing. And I'm just curious how you go about monitoring for those kind of issues, because we always talk about the fact when somebody's asking us about HIPAA compliance, and one of the most important things I say is to get their attention is, if your credit card's stolen, you kind of got an idea what to do. But how do you cancel a medical record? Boom.
Right.
So tell us what kinds of things you're doing along those fronts.
Yeah. So it's difficult to cancel a medical record, but I'll come back to that. Kind of that next phase of the process then, once you realize, we had a breach, we figured out who we have to notify. The next piece of that is you're required now to tell people bad news. Yeah. So what's the best way of going about delivering the bad news to those individuals? And, part of that process is the communications like we were talking about. So there's a lot of thought and effort that goes into that. But another important piece of it is what are you going to offer to these folks to protect them? And what we do there is we take the time to understand who are these people and what data was compromised, because like you said, if you lose a social security number and, name and address and things like that, that is some key information you can use to go and potentially create a new line of credit on someone. And so in that sense, credit monitoring can be appropriate. If you lose their payment information, credit card number, account numbers, and their name or something, opening up a new line of credit is really difficult. They might be able to charge something against your account, but not open a new line of credit. So in that case, credit monitoring isn't very valuable, but some other tools are that we can offer that help you undo any fraudulent charges that might be in your accounts and sort of take on the responsibility to help you with that. And then another case is, let's say they lose health information and or your health insurance number. That opens up the door to create health insurance fraud and or a number of other things. And so, again, the credit monitoring isn't going to pick that up. Maybe way down the path, if you're sent to collections and your credit actually starts to get dinged, but that's a long ways out and not necessarily guaranteed to show up on a credit report anyways. Mm-hmm. And so, again, monitoring isn't really the right solution for that. So to kind of answer your question now, when your health information is impacted, there's a couple of products we use in that scenario. One of them is actually where a lot of this information ends up. So a lot of hackers will come in, they'll steal what they can, it'll include health information, and then what they'll do is they'll sell it on the black market of the internet to criminals that are actually going to be the ones that go out and create that healthcare fraud. And so there's different places around the country where fraudulent business fronts that sometimes are actually part of a medical practice, and sometimes they're not a medical practice at all. It's just a warehouse, and what they're doing is they're running claims back to insurance companies saying, I sold or provided this service to Donna and sold her all this equipment, and I need to be reimbursed for $15,000 of the services I did, and I've got enough information about you to make a believable claim that Blue Cross or whoever is going to pay me that money before they realize that I'm not a real company and I didn't actually provide those services. And so if I do that a whole bunch of times to a whole bunch of people and eventually health plans, I can rake in a whole bunch of money over a few months, close up shop and move on somewhere else before anybody catches on. Mm-hmm. And so, there's huge money in that right now. And the effect then is your medical record now has all these things on it that are not real. You've also potentially change things like what your life insurance bill might be, because if you go to redo that, it's going to say you had all these procedures and you have all this equipment now and things like that. So it really is a risk for folks, and we can catch it though on the black market being transacted with one of our monitoring tools. And that one is the cyber scan, looks for your information being transacted in the black market. If we see it, we can alert you to it, and then we can take some steps to limit the damage that might occur. The other health monitoring tool we have, we call it Midas, and it actually monitors claims against your health plan. So very similar to the way credit monitoring works, where it alerts you when someone opens a new line of credit, hopefully you, but if not, you're alerted to it. In a very similar way, we monitor your health claims, and we alert you and say, it looks like you had this particular treatment today, confirm or deny, and it kind of pops up on your cell phone, and you can, very similar to some of the credit card companies have a similar program right now where it just asks you to confirm transactions that you may have actually done. So we go through and send a notice to the individual and say, did you have this procedure today? Did you have a chiropractic appointment with Dr. Smith this afternoon? And if you did, you don't worry about it. You just ignore it or confirm that you had it. But if you didn't, then you say, no, that's not me. I didn't do that. That's potentially fraud. And we're catching it right as that claim's being made. And then we're able to stop the payment from the insurance carrier. We're able to figure out who's trying to create the fraud, and we can go in and fix that for the individual. So part of that then might be getting reissued a new health information, or health plan number, a new card like that, and very similar to the credit card process.
Yeah, it's when it all gets mixed in with your medical records at a hospital or something along those lines that it gets most scary with the medical identity theft. But they're finding new ways, and that in itself could help, or at least mitigate the damage before it gets too serious.
Yep.
I think that's great stuff. So have we covered most of the things you do in your response? Because I have a couple other things I want to get in before we run out of time here.
Yeah, the only other thing that we do as part of our program is we typically will provide insurance to the individual. So that if there's ever an actual out-of-pocket expense related to identity theft that we can't recover for the person, we can make a claim for them against an insurance policy and get their money back that way. And so, it really is the most effective protection there is out there, is to have, kind of a customized protection for the type of loss they experienced, plus insurance, plus our experts working on their behalf to recover any fraud that may have occurred.
And these are things that the business that's incurred the breach could offer to them, as well as they could, if the business says, well, we're going to cover you for 2 years, and then the patients could elect to keep it for longer even.
That's right. Yep. We have a lot of folks who, like the protection and will, pay for it on their own after their free year or two expires from the company.
All right. Well, see, now you've got a whole plan.
Now, Jeremy, you talked about all the things that you do when somebody calls you and there's a breach, and I'm sure probably the vast majority of clients you have, that they're kind of reactive to a breach. But do you do anything proactively? So like if I called you, or if a client called you and said, I really want you to come in and let's do a breach response as if something happened, and let's see where we're at and make changes to make sure that when it does happen, it's a lot easier for you guys to do your job and for us to be protected. Do you have that as well?
Yep, we will certainly help folks run what we would call a tabletop or a mock incident, and basically simulate a data breach. And what we'll do there is take some time to set up an appropriate, realistic scenario for that company and their industry. And we might make it pretty gnarly just to really put them through their paces as to what might happen. But the idea is to really test the plan, and also to educate them on, here's some real issues that could happen, and here's the kinds of things you're going to need to think about and work together as a team. And I can't tell you how many times we go in and pull all these leaders of different departments in together, and sometimes they haven't even met each other. It's the first time they've actually met face to face rather in a meeting, because they just don't typically work together. So it's a lot better to meet and practice in that safe environment versus having to all show up to a real emergency meeting in the boardroom to start sorting through these issues, and you haven't even actually shaken their hand before.
So you would cover things like, when do I get my attorney involved, and the importance of having a written plan and a trained team, how important that is. They start to get it doing those tabletop exercises, I assume.
Absolutely. It takes time to digest their plan and then really, kind of expose maybe a few things in their plan that they're going to learn from and that will become things they want to change, most likely after the event. But yeah, absolutely putting them through the questions around when, who's my first call and how do I make that call? Is it to our attorney? Is it to our insurance broker? Is it, to our consultants? Is it to ID experts? And
is it to card and compliance? It's always card and compliance, I can tell you.
We just want to be the second phone call, that's all.
That's right. We get to call you. It's that panic call that we get, 3:00 in the afternoon on Friday. Always. I don't know how it always happens that way. So, and I know we're running low on time, but I did want to get in a quick discussion on cybersecurity insurance. Is it worth it? Because, we're starting to get a lot of conversations about it. And I know we could do a whole session on it, but I want to touch on it a little bit. David and I did a podcast on it earlier about, that the Cottage Health case that's going through the courts right now on should they pay or not. So we know that this is going to be a bigger issue going forward.
Yeah. The short answer is yes. Insurance is worth it because it's one of those things where you can't predict it and you can't predict what size it's going to be. So it's really hard to just budget for a data breach. And the other factor is the last thing you want to do is underfinance your response because that can be catastrophic to your company. If you don't handle it right, you're going to end up in a difficult situation where, there's ongoing litigation that's expensive. You're losing customers, which can be expensive. You're potentially fined and put on a corrective action plan from the regulators, which can be expensive just to deal with and then also to comply with. And so, all of those things can stack up really quickly and, put a company out of business if they're not prepared for it. And so cyber insurance is one way to offset that. There are 50, 60 companies out there offering these kinds of policies now, and they're all different, so it's important where the assumptions are with a lot of kinds of insurance, your GL and D&O and E&O type of insurances are fairly similar from company to company, and it's kind of the perks that come along with it that differentiate those policies. Mm-hmm. Whereas the policy itself, what triggers it is unique often, or at least slightly different between each of these carriers that are out there because they all have kind of a different way that they look at this. And, they're also learning, in the insurance sense, it's only a 10, 12-year-old product, maybe 15 at the most. And, so it's pretty immature still as an insurance product. And, so there's a lot of changes going on. The insurance market is very reactive too. So, right. There's a big Anthem health plan breach and no one wants to write insurance there. And there's all kinds of exclusions with, how that came around. And the year before that, it was nobody wants to sign up retail for insurance because of Target and Home Depot and those folks. And so, that extends down to the smaller companies in the same industries as well. So you got to make sure you have a specialty broker, I would recommend, and that they really know their stuff about these policies and really can explain to you the differences between them because there are plenty.
Right. And you need to be certainly aware of what you're committing to. It's kind of like, I know that if I call and say my car was stolen, but then I tell them I left the keys in it and didn't lock it in downtown Atlanta on the street, my insurance company is not going to be very interested in covering the theft of my vehicle.
No, that's true. And, so there is the application process even is changing a lot. And, they're going to ask questions around, your current level of compliance with privacy and security laws. And if you're not honest about that and constantly improving it, then you end up in that, the keys were in the ignition. So,
yeah. Even better, I left it running. Yeah, we've talked about how healthcare is known as the low-hanging fruit. It hangs so low you stumble on it when you get to the tree. So it's definitely something that we're trying to educate people about, and we're really thrilled that you've spent the time with us here to help educate people about it. And we're certainly going to have links to all of the things that we discussed in your site and so on and so forth on the Help Me with HIPAA website. you can get it there. And we try not to give out your home phone number or your cell phone number.
But we may.
But we may. You never know.
That brings all time, so that's okay.
But is there anything you want to throw out there and add right here as we get to the end?
No, I appreciate having the opportunity to hang out with you and talk about this stuff. I like it. It's always interesting to me, and so I'm happy to share some stories and do what I can to help out.
Yeah, sometime we'll have you on one of our horror story podcasts. We did that.
I'm sure he's got a ton of those.
Yeah, no, we did a scary stories one for Halloween. So maybe we'll do something soon. We'll find some other creepy thing to throw in there.
Yeah, like Valentine's Day.
I was going to say Friday the 13th, but you're probably right.
Valentine's Day. The worst breakups ever.
You're not supposed to be in a relationship between the end of November and St. Patrick's Day anyway.
That's it.
It's the most expensive time of the year.
That's right.
David, you're so cynical. I love that about you. I'm sure your wife does too.
Yeah. Fortunately, she's not here.
I know, really. And she doesn't often listen.
Yeah, she usually makes it past the first couple of minutes and goes, God, you guys are...
Does she do that in any conversation you have with her? First minute or two?
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, Jeremy, we appreciate your time and you being on here. And anybody that wants to contact IT experts, you make sure you tell them you heard about them on Help Me with HIPAA podcast, because we need all the help we can get. Promoting the podcast, I'm not talking about the mental health. We've all talked about that before, particularly David.
Yeah, I'm getting help for that.
And I'm proud of you, David. You didn't get it in yet, but go ahead and get it out of your system.
Yeah, I'm trying to leave it out.
No, you don't need to. People expect it. Throw it in there.
I'm just happy to know that Jeremy is also somebody who likes to be in people's breeches. Apparently he's a professional, so he's got it over me.
he's director of breeches.
I get paid for it.
No.
Yeah.
There's a good one.
So he's a gigolo.
Hey, there you go.
Just cut that part out.
So anyway, that was our show for today, and appreciate everybody listening. Remember to review us on iTunes if you haven't already. Share this episode out on your social media of choice. And as Donna mentioned, you can also visit us on the web at helpmewithhipaa.com. And you can even ask us a question right on our homepage, and we might feature your question in a future podcast. And remember, as always, HIPAA is not about compliance. It is about patient care. Have a great day.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.